Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into Unit 15, Environmental Economics. This is such a critical topic because it helps us understand a really powerful idea, that our biggest environmental challenges are also economic challenges. And getting a handle on that connection is really the first step toward finding solutions that actually work.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start by bridging the gap between economics and the environment. Then we'll look at why markets, which are usually so efficient, often struggle when it comes to nature. We'll also unpack the surprising idea of optimal pollution, check out the tools governments have to fix these problems, and talk about how we can even put a value on the environment itself. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary.
All right, first things first, let's connect these two big worlds, economics and the environment. To really get it, we need to start with one of the most basic fundamental ideas in all of economics. It really sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. Okay, so at the very heart of economics is this one powerful concept, scarcity. It's actually pretty simple. We humans have wants that are pretty much endless, right? But the resources our planet has to offer, things like clean air, fresh water, forests, they're limited. This basic conflict forces us to make choices about how we use these precious resources.
So, how do we make these choices? Well, for the most part, we rely on markets. The whole system of supply and demand is incredibly good at figuring out how to use scarce resources in the most efficient way possible, so that we get the most bang for our buck with as little waste as possible. But, and this is a big but, that system has a blind spot.
Let's move on and dig into that blind spot. We're going to see how this super efficient market system often kind of stumbles or even completely fails when we start talking about environmental issues. This is where it gets really interesting.
And that brings us to a huge, crucial question. If markets are all about being efficient and avoiding waste, why are we surrounded by so much pollution? Why doesn't the market just sort it out on its own?
Well, the answer is a key concept you absolutely need to know: market failure. This is what happens when the free market, just left to do its thing, doesn't lead to the best or most efficient result for society. And environmental problems are the textbook example of market failure in action. So what causes this failure? One of the biggest culprits is something called an externality. The easiest way to think about it is as a hidden cost or a side effect. So, for example, you have a factory that makes steel. But while it's making that steel, it's also dumping waste into a river. That pollution harms the local fishing industry. Now, that harm is a very real cost, but it isn't included in the price you pay for the steel. It's an external cost that society, not the factory, is forced to bear. This slide breaks down why markets struggle with this. See, markets are fantastic when it comes to private goods, like a cup of tea. It's rival. If I drink it, you can't, and it's excludable. You have to pay the cafe to get one. Simple. But many environmental resources, like clean air, are public goods. They're non-rival, me breathing the air doesn't stop you from breathing it, and they're non-excludable. You can't exactly charge people a fee to breathe. The market system just doesn't have a good way to manage something that everyone can use for free. So, if we know pollution is a problem because of market failure, it seems like the obvious answer is just get rid of all of it, right? Well, let's take a look at how economists think about this. The answer might actually surprise you.
So let's just ask the question straight up. Should our goal be a world with absolutely zero pollution? I mean, from a purely environmental view, that sounds perfect. But economists are always thinking about trade-offs.
And the answer, from a strictly economic perspective, is surprisingly no. The goal isn't zero pollution. The goal is to reach what economists call the optimal level of pollution. I know, that sounds a little crazy, but it just means finding the most efficient level for society as a whole.
So how do you find this optimal level? Well, it's a balancing act. On one side of the scale, you have damage costs. This is all the harm caused by pollution, health problems, damage to buildings and crops, all that bad stuff. On the other side, you have abatement costs. This is what it costs to reduce or clean up pollution, like a factory spending millions on new filters. The optimal level is that sweet spot where the total of those two costs combined is as low as it can possibly be. Okay, so if the market can't find this perfect balance on its own, someone has to step in. And that's where the government and its policies come into the picture. Let's have a look at the main tools in the government's toolbox for dealing with pollution.
So you can basically split the approaches into two big categories. On one hand, you have command and control. This is kind of the old school way. The government just makes a strict rule, like you cannot release more than 10 tons of this chemical a year. It's direct, but it can be inefficient because it treats every polluter the same. The more modern approach is using market-based instruments,
This is a lot more clever. It uses economic incentives to get businesses to change. Basically, it makes it expensive to pollute, so companies are motivated to find the cheapest, most efficient way to clean up.
And here are some of the most common market-based tools. You've got things like pollution taxes, where you literally make polluters pay for the social cost of their waste. Then there are tradable permits, sometimes called cap and trade. Here, the government sets a total cap, or limit, on pollution, and then companies can buy and sell permits that allow them to pollute within that limit. You can also use subsidies, which are basically rewards for doing the right thing, like adopting green technology. And finally, you have deposit refund schemes. Like when you pay a deposit on a plastic bottle and get it back when you return it for recycling.
This all leads us to a really fascinating and frankly a very difficult question. How on earth do you put a price tag on nature? I mean, what is the monetary value of a beautiful forest or a clean river?
This is a massive challenge, right? Because if something doesn't have a price, it often gets treated as if it has zero value, and we all know that's just not true. So to make good policy decisions, we need to find some way to measure the economic value of these natural treasures.
To solve this, economists came up with the idea of total economic value. It's broken into two big categories. First, use values. This includes the obvious stuff, like the direct use of resources we consume, like timber and fish. It also includes indirect use, which are services nature provides, like bees pollinating our crops for free. And there's option value, the value of keeping something around for a future use we might not even know about yet. But then there's the second category, non-use values, which is really interesting. This includes existence value, the value we get just from knowing that the Amazon rainforest exists, even if we never go there. And bequest value, the value of preserving nature for future generations.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, so let's do a really quick summary of the main takeaways from this unit just to help lock in all these ideas for your revision.
Key idea number 1. Remember that environmental problems are fundamentally economic problems. They're often caused by market failures, because the price we pay for things doesn't include the hidden environmental damage, those externalities.
Key idea number 2. The economic goal isn't to get to zero pollution. It's to find that optimal level, which is a balance between the cost of the damage pollution causes and the cost of cleaning it up.
Key idea number 3. To fix these market failures, governments need to step in. They use policy tools like taxes and tradable permit systems to make polluters pay for the true environmental cost of what they do.
And finally, key idea number 4. We have to find ways to value our environmental goods. To make smart decisions, we have to consider everything, from the resources we use directly to the simple value of knowing that nature exists. It's essential for making better policies.
I hope this breakdown was helpful for your studies. For more clear explanations and daily IGNOU videos, subscribe to IGNOU Mind Decoded.